Welcome to Encroachment Sports Talk. The NFL is a year-round business, and in order to keep some kind of news, stay in the news at this time of the year between the combine and the draft, they have released some rules changes, and so that's something interesting to talk about. So we're going to run through some of the big rules changes that were just released and give you our thoughts on the matter. The
Sounds good.
first, kind of the most major one, is new kickoff rule changes. Everybody knows over the last handful of seasons, the kickoff is sort of a foregone conclusion. It's going to be a touchback for the most part. Kickers boom it into the end zone, touchback. It's just a waste of like 45 seconds, and then they start from the 25-yard line.
Right.
But this year, let me run through the details of these changes, and then I'll get your input on what you think about it, Chris. So they're still going to be kicking off from the 35-yard line. And that's about all that's remained the same.
Right.
The kicking team will now, everybody except the kicker will now line up at the opponent's 40-yard line. And they can't move until the ball lands or is caught in the what they call the landing zone, which is the 0 to 20-yard line. The receiving team has to have 9 players between their own 30 and 35. So basically kind of 5 yards off of the defense, which is at the 40. So that, obviously that will take away the injury risk. Landing zone between the 0 and 20. If a ball falls short of the landing zone for whatever reason, the ball goes out to the 40, just like balls that are kicked out of bounds. And if a ball goes in the end zone, it can be a touchback, but only if there's no more fair catch inside in the landing zone. If it's in the landing zone, you have to return it. And then touchback will now be spotted at the 30-yard line as opposed to the 25. So I think that kind of sums it up.
That's a heck of a summary right there, Mark. You get extra extra donuts for that summary, because that was pretty incredible. I mean, there are a lot of major. Wait till you see what this looks like. I mean, I thought the most interesting thing was the article you sent me. It's the XFL is where they took this from, right? So if you want to know what this looks like, because it'll be very different than you're used to, go to Twitter or X or whatever and look at what the XFL does, because it's going to look completely different than what you're used to.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts?
I like it. I think it's great. I think it's going to bring back the potential of some kind of explosive plays in the kicking game again, which we didn't have here for extended time. It also is going to, as you mentioned, it's going to you're going to continue to take away that like 40-yard run at each other, which was always the concern with injuries, right? So I'm all for it, and we've already kind of seen some of the people are already starting to sign kick returners again. Remember the old Devin Hester days and stuff when you had a designated kick. So Cordell Patterson, who used to be a Viking, a lot of other places, was with the Falcons lately. He just signed a contract, a 2-year deal, and he's going to be their designated kick returner. So that'll be a specialized position again.
I have a correction. He's not just a kick return specialist. He's a lead running back in Atlanta. At least he was.
He was. He's also a receiver. I mean, he's got a lot of. He's a jack of all trades.
Yeah, as I had Bijan in fantasy and tuned into Falcons games only to see Cordarrelle Patterson getting like all the carries. Thank God that coach was fired.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolute fool. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's just fantasy league built up frustration coming out.
Oh no, I feel you, and you're actually describing it for about millions of other fantasy.
Yeah, I know. So I agree with you. I think it will make the game way more exciting without sacrificing safety, because you're not going to have, now you might have a guy running 30 yards before getting hit, as opposed to, 60-yard impact with a guy going full blast. So, but there's a couple of tweaks that I thought, like, while you're at it, if you're reading the fine print, why did they make these decisions? I don't like touchbacks being the 30-yard line. I get why they did that. They wanted it to be an incentive to to actually
run
have
back.
returns. They don't want kickers booming it into the end zone, but I think the 25 is still sufficient. But that's, you know, I just think, you know, that adds to more offense, more scoring. I just think taking the ball at the 30, you're only about with the legs of these field goal kickers nowadays, you're about 25 yards from a field goal at that point, you know.
Well,
So
you know the answer to that, right? The general trend has always been to help the offense. So
oh yeah. So that's my minor pick. But so here's two that I really don't like. You know that after a safety, remember the safety, it's like, yeah, we got a safety and we get the advantage of getting the ball in a good position.
right.
Now what they're doing, you kick off from the 20, but the setup and landing zone will not change.
Oh, that's weird. Yeah.
So who cares where the kicker's kicking from?
Right.
I mean, I guess you can argue, but okay, and they can tee it up now.
Right.
So most kickers kicking from the 20 will still get it to at least the 5-yard line because they used to kick it through the end zone from the 35.
Right.
So all you know, and then all the guys are already lined up at the 40. So you really, after a safety, you're going to see field position, like instead of usually you can expect it at least to the 40 after a safety. Now it's not going to be really any different. Maybe
it's less
5 yards.
beneficial. Yeah, it's less beneficial.
Yeah, so like I think they should move it back, change the landing zone from like the 20 to the 40 or something, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
Or
The fact that we're
10
talking
10
about
to the-
the fact that we're talking about landing zones is
Yeah, I know.
it's like a military operation or something. What the heck are landing zones? Who knew that was
I'm-
going to be a part of
I'm-
the football?
My mind's in a more dirty place than that when you
Yeah,
say
okay, yeah.
the landing strip.
It's so funny.
So you know, here's one that's even worse though. Penalties that are assessed on the kickoff. They will only impact the spot of the kick, but not the landing zone or the setup. So now you get to kick off instead of the 35, you get to kick off from maybe the 45, right? But you still have to get it between the 10 and 20 and everybody's in the same position anyway. It's like there's no benefit. Yeah, so both of those, like they could have, I don't understand the logic behind those two. So I think you're gonna have people complaining about the whole safety thing.
Yeah, I do too.
And it's like there's literally like 8 bullet points to this rule, and I combed through it as you gave me the credit for it. And these were the two that I picked out that I wasn't impressed with. You know, overall, other than those really somewhat blatant oversights, especially the safety one. You know, if you get a penalty assessed after the kickoff, who cares? You know, that's always kind of minor. But a safety, you expect to have the ball in good position. Like there's some teams that rely on defense that have relatively weak offenses. And when they get a safety, okay, now we got a chance to score, but they're not going to get the ball in good position anymore, which is, I don't like that.
Yeah, I agree. Well, you're one of probably, you know, the 1% that has actually read through these in detail. wait till the regular fans get surprised on the safety and they're going to be like,
oh yeah,
what just happened here?
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, overall good. It's definitely going to bring back excitement. And the one other point you pointed out, like the increase in value for kick return specialists. But what about also with the decrease in injury risk? What about turning position players that were otherwise considered too valuable to return kicks into kick returners? Like, you know, from a selfish perspective, what about Devin, forget how they pronounce his name, Achan or whatever, or Tyreek Hill actually returning kickoffs now.
That's a good point. Yeah, and you can have two back there too. So sometimes people will kind of rotate that. They'll have one or they'll have two. You'll never really know. So that's kind of cool. But that's a good point, Mark. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, I think you may see more valuable players, you know, running backs and such.
Returning kicks. My God, we talk about a nightmare for the opposing team. Like
we are going to see so many more kick returns for touchdowns, because the other thing is a couple of things. Defenses are going to take a while to figure out how to set up their, you know, they have to line up at the 40, but you could probably drop back. Like, do you want all guys at the 40 and only have one line to get through?
Right.
Probably not, right?
Right.
So they're kind of start dropping back. Like that'll be interesting. And until that's ironed out, you're going to see way more kick returns for touchdowns. So
Yeah, that's exciting. I think, that'll be good.
it's
But you're right.
exciting.
That's really interesting thing.
It'll only be good if it's your team doing the
Yeah.
scoring the touchdown.
Of course, you're excited because you got all the speedsters in the world. You
We
basically
also-
have a track team on your.
Yes, but we also seem to have the worst special teams defense in the history of the game. So
Yeah. So it's a push for you, but
I hope I'd be happy with a push. So let's move on. Let's talk about the next one, which is a hip drop tackle, which has been banned.
yes.
And specifically, this is how it's worded. A hip drop tackle needs to have two characteristics. The defender grabs the runner with both hands or both arms and unweights himself by swiveling and dropping his hips and or lower body. And finally, landing on and trapping the runner's legs at or below the knee.
Right.
So I think that's a key piece to it. And when that happens, the rate of injury is actually 25 times more than any other tackle in the NFL. And then finally, one more stat I found is this kind of tackle happens once per game, and it was up 65% last year over the prior year.
Oh yeah.
So, 2 years ago, it happened once every 3 games. And so it's not a super common type of tackle, right?
And there were some pretty serious injuries that happened with that tackle this last year. Like for instance, I think Chubb was a guy who was one that was a victim. I mean, some big time names were taken out of the equation.
Would that have been considered a hip drop?
Because this is where it gets interesting.
Yeah,
because the flips. Yeah,
I don't think Chubb would have, because I believe he got he was getting tackled up top and then somebody took him out at the knee, as opposed to him going out because somebody fell on his.
Yeah.
The same tackler has to fall on his knee.
Gotcha. So, but I think there have been other examples. I can't off the top of my head.
Tyreek Hill lost some time with the hip drop. When I forget, in the middle of our late season swoon, there was 1 or 2 games where Hill, lost a lot of time, and it was because of a hip drop tackle.
Okay.
And I believe Waddle as well.
Yeah.
Frankly, that kind of tackle tends to happen when you have a speedy wide receiver getting to the edge, and all you can do is kind of pull him down from behind. And
right.
So again, it could be another pro Miami Dolphin rule.
Did you have a direct participation in the rules committee this time, Mark?
It almost, honestly, as we get through the rest of these, it almost feels like it almost feels like I did, because all of my pet peeves were addressed. It's crazy.
I know. That's why you're so excited to do this episode. And I agree with you. I think they're all positive.
Yeah, I mean, I think this will be interesting. Like, I don't know that anybody really knows what will be classified as a hip drop tackle, and we'll learn a lot. There'll be some times but generally when the guy gets pulled down from behind and he gets hurt, they're going to throw a flag.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So the key word there is swivel hip.
Yeah.
And so that's where it's going to be interesting to see how the refs train for that and apply it. So
yeah, my original fear was you'll never be able to bring a guy down from behind anymore. But the hip drop is very effective if you can get him up top and then you swivel and fall back. You're going to prevent him from gaining any forward yards. So now you go up top and you have to sort of let your dead body weight fall on his back, and he's going to carry you forward for 2 more yards.
Or you're going to have to try to trip him up, right? And you might
trip him up, but either of those, they move forward.
Right.
The hip drop was very effective at stopping forward progress, right?
Right, and that's why they did it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it was
around the goal line, especially, or whether they're going towards a first down or something like that. Right?
Yeah, so I think you're again another move towards more offense, right? You're going to see a lot more chains being extended. So
I think it's positive, right? You agree?
What's that?
You think it's positive?
Absolutely, especially when I saw that 25 times rate of injury and it only happens once a game. Because frankly, I mean, this is always something I've said in frustration. If a guy, due to a dirty play, takes another guy out in injury, that guy should miss as much time as the one who's injured missed.
Yeah.
And at least this will be a 15-yard penalty. I mean, it's a
Right.
minor price to pay, right?
Right.
So I
Yeah.
think, it's a step in the right direction. And
Absolutely.
as a deterrent, mostly, I mean,
Well,
hopefully,
that's it. A deterrent. As any rule, it's going to be interesting in terms of the application and enforcement.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the third rule change that is of some interest, but relatively minor, I think, but coaches will now get a third challenge. So right now they have two challenges, and if they win them both, they get a third. But the rule changes, they'll get a third challenge, and if they win one, they'll get a third. I'm sorry. They get two challenges, and if they win one of those two, they'll get a third challenge.
Yeah. So if they have a 50% success rate on their two, so 1 out of 2, they get a third. I like it. And I actually think it's a bigger deal than you might think, because I remember a game where it would have changed maybe the game. And that is the Detroit Dallas game. Remember, they were out of timeouts and they said one guy reported ineligible or whatever. I don't know, but they could have stopped it right there and challenged it, and who knows if it would.
I'm guessing that that's one of those things that is not reviewable, right? Because they actually announced on TV, on the loudspeaker, the wrong guy reported as eligible, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, like, here's my thought on replay. I'm not one to care if the game finishes early. Frankly, football games end too quickly for me. Like, when my team's playing, it's like, oh my God, it's almost over already. Like, I would watch the Dolphins if they played 6-hour games. So as long anything that gets the play more correct and more fair.
I agree.
Nobody cares. People love
it.
football. This is not baseball where you want the game over quicker because there's a
there's
460.
There's only 17 of these. We got to get right. Yeah.
Exactly. So let's move into the specific replay rule changes. There's 3 of them that they implemented. The first is this replay assist, which they have done for playoff games. Replay assist will now be allowed to correct objectively incorrect calls for intentional grounding and roughing the passer. Hallelujah, right?
Yeah, I agree completely.
How many crappy roughing the passer calls have ruined games? And anybody watching on TV is like, they called that roughing the passer. Now, there's still some gray area in terms of what is objectively incorrect and when will this replay assist kick in.
Yeah, that's it. It's the definition of the word, right?
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know if you remember, this is a Dolphin fan thing, but when Jalen Phillips 2 years ago on a Sunday night football game against the Chargers came in and sacked Herbert at the 4-yard line, and he sacked him and then didn't land on him, and they ruled, roughing the passer, and it kept the drive alive, got them points, and changed the game.
Well, and it can go both ways too, right? Because I think there are times when it is roughing the passer and they may have missed it, and so they can call it, right?
Oh, yeah. That's probably the case, because I don't think you can challenge a non-call, but in this case, this is replay assist. It's not a challenge. Maybe they can. That'll be interesting. Good point.
Yeah.
Okay. Another replay rule change is replay review will be allowed when there is clear and obvious visual evidence that the game clock expired before any snap.
This is your biggest pet peeve in the history of pet peeves.
But they didn't address it. They did not address it. Do you know what game clock means?
Yeah, right.
It means end of the quarter.
Oh, interesting.
It doesn't mean the snap. I had to research this carefully. It does not mean the play clock.
Oh, it doesn't.
Why would you do one and not the other?
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. That's crazy. So it doesn't.
Why would you do one and not the other? This, as Chris points out, like in basketball, they'll go back and replay whether the ball is off the guy's fingertips. Yet in football, you can see it in real time. It gets to 0 and they snap it after and they let it go.
Right. Yeah.
And then sometimes they'll call it. Other times,
Right.
My pet peeve about football, if there's gray area, the refs can control the game.
Right.
Because things need to be black and white. So you can't, it's like, there's holding on every play.
Right.
So at the times where they call holding, well, there was holding. Well, you don't call that 9 times out of 10, but we did this time because, that's gray area.
Right.
So anyway, that's a pet peeve of mine. And you know, why address this one and not the play
But
clock?
yeah, so I misinterpreted this one obviously because you've done a deeper dive on these rules. But I thought they actually said the not the shot clock, but the play clock.
Yeah.
I thought they were saying, hey, look, if it goes to 0 and you still haven't snapped it, we can.
Yep.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't.
How many times have you ever seen a snap at the very end of the quarter matter?
Yeah.
How many times?
Some of these rules, it must be because one team got
Yeah.
hurt one time and they like lobby for the rest of the teams. They're like, we can't have this. And
Yeah.
you know, so but it's that is so obtuse. It's unbelievable.
Exactly. This will happen once every 6 years. Okay, great rule, you know. I mean, it's not a bad change. They just
Right. But
they
you know, they could have gone a lot further with it.
exactly. The final one is ruling of a passer down by contact or out of bounds before throwing a pass are now reviewable.
Yeah.
No brainer. Like why would it ever have not been reviewable? You know, like I think everything should be reviewable.
Well,
Even
that's it.
penalties.
I'm getting to the point now with all this replay assist. I'm like you. I'm like, let's use this as much as possible because
Yep.
there's no way a game that goes that quickly with that many people on the field is being, you know, captured by that team of refs and umps. There's just no way. So use the technology.
Yep.
And let's make it, like you said, let's make it as fair as possible. And if it goes an extra 15 minutes, I don't care. There's only 17 games. I want it right.
Yeah. I don't think anyone cares. Any real football fan does not care.
No.
I mean, it interrupts the flow of the game. That's not pleasant, but it's also kind of exciting to see what they're going to do. You know, I don't know why sometimes they take so long, but yeah. Speaking of replay and a different sport, I'm watching my Red Sox last night and leadoff hitter in the 9th inning down 1 run, 2 straight ball 4 pitches. They show the box and you can see where the ball comes in. 2 straight that were ball 4 that they missed.
Right.
Second one being a strikeout instead of ball 4. And suddenly, instead of having the leading guy on down 1 in the 9th against a flamethrower, you know, you don't have anybody on and the next 2 guys make outs. You know, against a flamethrower, you can get a bunt down, get the guy to second and rattle the pitcher. And, you know, Major League Baseball needs to get rid of the home plate ump as soon as
I agree. I've thought that for the last, since they've been showing that box and how consistent it is, it's like, why even have them there? Exactly. Or he's not calling balls and strikes, he's calling other stuff, but he's not.
Yeah, foul balls and plays at the plate or whatever. Right, yeah. Anyway, do you have any other thoughts on rules changes or anything?
Well, no, there were 2 other just really talk about obtuse. You've got the emergency QB rule, right? You can bring them off both the rosters, the 53-man roster and the practice squad. And then you can designate a player to return during the playoffs. So I guess that came up this last year, I guess, for somebody, Detroit or somebody. So
what's the playoff one? Anybody can return. Like you have a limit of like 8 people that can return, but now it's unlimited for the playoffs.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's unlimited for the playoffs. So you don't have to like. Okay. Yeah. Because otherwise you don't have to, I mean, otherwise you have to kind of know exactly who you might want and how far along they are and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, okay. Right. That's a good one.
Yeah. It's a minor one, but I guess Detroit felt it impacted their playoff run a little bit. So
okay. Yeah, and then the quarterback one. So I think you're gonna see most teams carrying 2 quarterbacks now and having a third on the practice squad, right?
You got it. Right, exactly. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So you might see some poaching of marginal quarterbacks. That'll be, you know, interesting if you like your third quarterback, whether you keep him on the roster or the practice.
Yeah, they're going to have to make some decisions if you really like a third. And there's been instances, it's rare, but a third quarterback becomes.
Well, wasn't Purdy a third quarterback?
Yeah, well, he was. Yeah, exactly. So
I don't know. They probably would have protected him, kept him on the active roster, but you never know, right?
Right. You never know.
But then again, nobody else is going to know how good they are until they play.
With my franchise, anytime I can potentially get a new young quarterback, I'm all for it. So anyway, whether it's poaching, whether it's the draft, whether I'll take it anyway at this point.
I think your franchise should have gone after Justin Fields, but that's another
I
story.
agree. Don't get me started. For a 6th-round pick, are you kidding?
I know.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, great. Another great episode, and we'll catch up soon. We have the NFL draft coming up, so we're going to do some draft.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. We both have a lot invested in that draft, so it'll be good.
Well, thanks, Chris.
Sounds good.